There's a part of me that this morning that wishes that I could attend one of the masses at St. Michael's Church. I'd just like to go there and pray for them. One of my favorite experiences with St. Michael's happened years ago. Ruth Vogel, who comes here, her husband Bill died 23 years ago. And Bill and I were good friends. And we were in Kiwanis together. And Bill loved to spend other people's money on other people. He just loved to do that. And I always enjoyed Bill Vogel's philosophy of math. We back in those days, Kiwanis didn't have as much money as they do now. And we would sometimes argue about where the money would go. And one meeting, we were having a kind of an intense discussion on where to put the money. And so Bill just said, wait a minute. Bill was a big guy with an incredible voice. He said, now, I got an idea. We're going to give half our money to the food pantry. We're going to give half our money to this family who is trying to buy a handicapped accessible van for their disabled daughter. And then Don will give the rest of the money to the person in your church you want to help. I said, Bill, you said half here, half there, it's gone, and then you said the rest of the money is going to my church. And he says, Don, when it comes to giving, there's always enough to go around. And that was Bill's philosophy, especially when it came to sharing at Christmas. I took it hard when Bill died. And at that time, the priest at St. Michael's was Father Ed McLaughlin. God, I love that guy. Ed would work out at the Riviera. Whenever I would see him, I would say, well, Ed, I hardly recognize you with clothes on, you know. We always saw him in the locker room or on the treadmill. And I was trying to turn Bill into a Lutheran, but he was still Catholic when he died, so the Mass was at St. Michael's. And Father Mac called me, and he said, Don, I would like you to do the sermon at Bill's funeral. And I said, Ed, did you check with the Pope? And he said, I don't listen to the Pope. I just listen to my heart. Well, today, the hearts of the community of St. Michael has got to be heavy. Thankfully, Elizabeth Kostek is okay and home. But educator Margaret Legia, she passed away when she was hit by an intoxicated driver after a party for the St. Michael staff on Wednesday. You know, grief and sadness know no denomination. Just like giving unto others knows no denomination. What happened to Margaret and her family should have never, ever happened. And you know, some of you have been victims of that kind of event, and there's pain, and there's anger, and there's sadness, and there's doubts, and there's wonder. And when it all comes together, well, she is our sister. And the people at St. Michael's are our brothers and sisters. And the differences and the name and the brand just don't matter. All that matters is the spirit of the Christ child. All that matters is that somehow the spirit of this season will speak to them and bring them healing and hope. Yes, in the middle of all this kind of stuff, that's where Christmas speaks the loudest. Because Christmas is about a baby born in a manger who died way too young because he was kind and forgiving and blessed. On Friday, I went to a place called RML. It's a long-term rehab center in Hinsdale. And you remember a month ago, a young man from Lewis University and one of his classmates were returning to Lewis University that evening for a rehearsal for their gospel choir, where they were blindsided by an intoxicated driver. And Michael Hassan is now in rehab, and he was in a coma for a long time. And on Friday, I sat at his bedside with his mom and dad and shared with them some of the money that has come from our love bucket. Michael still can't talk, but his eyes are wide open and he looks at you, and I just want to go, what are you thinking? You know, what are you saying? and his body is starting to move a little bit. But I'll tell you, the grace and the warmth of his two parents, talk about Jesus, and talk about Christmas, and talk about your circle of life being turned upside down in a moment of time that should never have happened. And with a last name like Hassan, I don't think he's Lutheran. But Christmas reminds me once again, and he does in his silence, that this season is not about the church and what religion you are. It's not about what's on the sign. It's about the spirit that we carry inside our hearts when we walk out this door and go about the ordinary tasks that make us who we are. There's a church a few right and left turns down from our church. And this morning, as they worship at their Mass, they're trying to make sense out of something that makes no sense. And there's a family sitting at the bedside in Hinsdale wondering what the future holds for their son. And the dad has to go back to work tomorrow because, he said, Pastor Don, got to pay the bills. And luckily, his mom, who's a teacher's aide, has been given a leave of absence. And each one of us, we're going to go about our business today. We have homes to decorate, and we have a nice Sunday school program here at 4 p.m. You're invited to come by. We have presents to buy, obligations to fill. We want to make Christmas happen to those who are close to us. But then I look at the prayer book, and I think about Bill Vogel's way of doing math. I think of a teacher whose journey was cut short, and I think of a young man who never made it to his gospel choir rehearsal. And in closing, I think of one of our own kids. Jack, who's the grandson of our custodian, he's in my 8th grade confirmation class. And Jack has been in and out of the hospital for months and has not gone to school hardly at all this year. And anyway, I went to visit him at the University of Chicago Hospital. And I walk into Jack's room, and he's in bed, and he's tired. And I walk in and I say, "Hi, Jack." And his weary eyes look at me. And he says, "Pastor Don, how are you and Peggy and Quentin doing?" And I thought to myself, in a me-first world, it's amazing who can teach us exactly where Jesus lives every day. Amen. If you're able to, please rise for the creed. It's on page 105.